Hey guys, how are you? Okay. So please don't forget to turn your cameras on as we start the session. Let's see. I think this is 1804. Okay, guys. So don't forget your cameras. Seeing people. Okay, so we'll continue today working on the speaking section. Today is in fact our last class. So we're gonna be looking at our last task. Which would it be our last task? How many tasks do we have in the speaking? 4. Exactly. So we're gonna look at the last one, which is task number 4. And then we're done with the speaking section. Okay, guys. So task 4 is actually pretty similar to task 3. If you guys remember, in task 3, we needed to do 2 things. What did we need to do for task 3? Alexandra, do you remember? No. What about you, Leonardo?
Yesterday?
Do you remember what task 3 looked like? What you needed to do in task 3 in the previous one?
No, I don't remember.
Okay. You guys needed to read an article, then listen to a lecture, and then summarize, right? That was task 3. So this one here is pretty similar to that, but the only difference is that there's no article any longer. Everything will be based on a university lecture. You will just have to listen to this lecture, and then you will have to basically summarize. You will have 20 seconds in this case to prepare your response and 1 minute as usual to speak, okay? 20 seconds to prepare, 60 seconds to speak. That is the difference, right? Because you usually have 30. In this case, you have 20. Any questions about this? You listen to a lecture, 20 seconds to prepare, 60 seconds to summarize. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So without further ado, let's start looking at what is the most important part in order to crash this question here. This is going to be key. And that is the structure of the lecture. If you understand this, then it will be a lot easier for you to be prepared to what you can expect when you are taking the test, and also to understand better and also have a better response, of course. So in this lecture, remember that you will have somebody speak. So we're gonna call that somebody the professor, because it's a college professor. And this professor is gonna first introduce the topic. And that is gonna happen in the introduction of the lecture. So in the introduction, you will have a brief introduction to what the topic is gonna be. So for example, let's say that our topic will be pollution. Okay, this is gonna be our topic. So the professor will greet the class, introduce the topic, and maybe sometimes this is optional. You can have a brief definition of the topic. So maybe the professor is gonna define pollution or explain pollution, or sometimes give an example, or I don't know, a historical note, explain a little bit of the history of the word. I don't know, but maybe you have some content there. Maybe, okay, a definition, an explanation, an example of the topic. Could happen. Now, what I want to be real clear about is that this introduction, everything that I just mentioned, is not that important, okay? You don't want to worry too much about the introduction. In fact, I am going to suggest you guys not to take notes in the introduction. When you're listening to it, just listen. Don't take notes, don't try to memorize anything, only listen to the introduction, okay? That's everything I'm asking you to do. Because honestly, you're not going to use this. You're not going to use what you have in the introduction. So why bother, right? You don't need to bother yourself taking notes. So I only understand the topic, right? Have an idea of what you will be seeing and how it will be and everything else, but don't take notes. Now, after the introduction, the professor is going to divide this topic, break it down into 2 different subtopics. And this is the most important part. This is the body of the structure of the lecture, sorry. So what do I mean by subtopics? They're going to be basically divisions of the topic. It could be anything, really. If we're talking about pollution, maybe you have 2 causes of pollution, 2 effects of pollution, 2 definitions of the word pollution, 2 studies that prove pollution, maybe 2 types of pollution, okay? Anything at all. Let's say that you have 2 types. The first type is going to be water contamination, and the second type will be, let's make it red, air pollution. Okay, I'm just making it up. So let's say these are your subtopics, 2 types of pollutions. So maybe when the professor explains those, you will have a definition in there. So what water pollution actually is. So you will have a definition for each one. Now, that is important, okay? The subtopics, catching what those 2 subtopics are, whatever they are, it could be a term, sometimes a very specific term. So make sure that you look for those subtopics when you're listening. That is important, okay? That is what you're going to use. So you need to make sure that you do take notes on that part. You need to understand the 2 subtopics, and if possible, it would be great if you also catch the definitions. Okay, they are also important, although not as important as the topics, the subtopics, but they are also important. Okay, those are the 2 subtopics. And finally, there's one more layer that you will have, and those are the examples. Each subtopic is going to have its own details, its own examples. So example 1 for the first subtopic and example 2 for the second subtopic. So for example, if we're talking about water, then maybe you have the name of a river. You have the Colorado River has been polluted since this time and so on. Okay, you have that example. If we're talking about air pollution, perhaps you have something like, I don't know, Coca-Cola company. Wow, I think I did it in the wrong place, didn't I? Sorry. Okay, the subtopic was air pollution, right? Don't forget. And its definition. And the example could be something like, I don't know, Coca-Cola company and how they pollute the air. So that's what you guys will have. 2 subtopics, maybe their definitions, and 2 specific examples or details, okay? And that is the important thing that you need to catch. You need those 2 subtopics and 2 examples at least, okay? So is this okay so far, the structure of the lecture that you hear? Do you have any questions about this? Okay. One thing that I want to say here that I think it's important is that everything that I'm teaching you, the structure of the test in terms of format, okay? The format of the test that I'm teaching you. So when I mean the structure of the lecture, the structure of the reading article, everything is based on the actual TOEFL from the ETS, okay? So this is what happens every time you take the test probably, or you practice with official practice sets. So if you look, for example, if you look at the practice sets that you have from the software that you got for the simulation test, do you remember that software that you needed to install and then take your test there? So if you look at that, then you'll see that every question 4 of the speaking section looks like this. It has an intro to the topics, 2 examples, because it's official from the ETS. Now, if you practice from a different website, if you're practicing from something unofficial, then you may have something different, okay? I don't want to confuse you about this. Maybe you're gonna encounter something different when you're practicing, but that's because you're not practicing from official tests, okay? But don't worry, this is how your actual test will look like, all right? So is that okay too? Any questions about that? Okay, guys. So moving on, without going any deeper, why don't we just start with an example? So let's look at what we have here. I'm gonna play the lecture. I'm gonna ask you guys to please take notes. Remember, try to organize your notes like this. For the topic, don't write anything down, please. Don't take any notes for the introduction, okay? That's the topic. Only focus on the 2 subtopics and the 2 examples, okay? Let's see. I'm gonna play the lecture and it's gonna look you're gonna see how it actually will be when you take the test on your screen. Let's see.
Number 4. In this question, you will listen to a short lecture. You will then be asked to summarize important information from the lecture. After you hear the question, you will have 20 seconds to prepare your response and 60 seconds to speak. Listen to part of a lecture in a business class.
If a consumer has to choose between 2 products, what determines the choice? Assume that someone, a purchaser, is choosing between 2 products that cost the same, okay? If people have a choice between 2 identically priced products, which one will they choose? They choose the one they think is of higher quality, of course. But what does it mean for a product to be a high-quality product? Well, business analysts usually speak of 2 major factors of quality. One factor is reliability, and the other is what we call features. So reliability. What's reliability? Well, a product is reliable if it works the way we expect it to work, if it can go a reasonable amount of time without needing repairs. If a product, a car for example, doesn't work the way it should and needs repairs too soon, we say it's unreliable. So product reliability means basically the absence of defects or problems that you weren't expecting. It used to be that when people thought about product quality, they thought mainly about reliability. Today, it's different. People do still care about reliability, don't get me wrong. It's just that manufacturing standards are now so high that, we'll take cars for example, today. Today's cars are very reliable. So reliability is important, but it's not going to be the deciding factor. So if reliability isn't the deciding factor anymore, what is? Features. All those extras, the things a product has that aren't really necessary, but that make it easier to use or that make it cool. For example, new cars today are loaded with features like electric windows, sunroofs, air conditioning, stereos, and so forth. When people are comparing products today, they look at features because reliability is pretty much equal across the board. And that's why manufacturers include so many features in their products.
Using points and examples from the lecture, explain the 2 major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed.
Begin to prepare
I'm sorry, guys, I'm really sorry. Did you finish listening to the lecture?
Yes.
Yes, you did? Yep, you did.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
teacher.
All right, thank you. Okay, then what I was saying is just, I was asking you, right? How was it? Did you identify those elements we talked about?
Yes.
Okay, so then let's talk about what it was. Now, the first thing, before we get into the details, I want to say, remember how I told you not to take notes from the introduction about the topic? So first thing, you will remember what the topic is. Even if you don't take notes, I am pretty sure that you will remember the topic, especially after listening to everything else. But most importantly, the reason why I told you not to take notes is because the easier way and the fastest thing that you can do to save time, even when you answer, is use what you have in the question. Okay, I cannot say that enough. I cannot emphasize it enough. You need to use what you have from the question. It is a great deal. So in the question you have using points and examples and so on. That doesn't matter because it's always the same. The important thing is what comes after explain. Explain something. So read that and use it, okay? Maybe you can even take notes about this. When you're preparing, that's what I would honestly do. Okay, so if we read, it says, explain the two major factors of product quality and how their role in consumer decision-making has changed. So that you have in the question, that is actually the topic, okay? And you can use that, you can copy and paste it in your response or in your notes. And that's what we're gonna do. The topic is two factors, okay, what is it? Two factors of product quality and consumer decision making, right? And that's everything you need to know about the introduction, about the topic. Everything's gonna be a lot more clear now. So is that part okay? Do you agree with me that that is the topic, or do you think that maybe it might be something else? Maybe I'm wrong. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Now let's talk about what you understood from the lecture. So can anyone tell me the first subtopic? What was the first subtopic that we had?
Reliability.
Good, reliability. You see how it's a specific term? So it's really important to catch that term. Now, did we have any definitions for reliability? What is it?
It is when something works the way we expect it to work.
Okay, good. Anything else?
In itself, it's just quality.
Access on defects.
Okay, good. Absence of defects. Okay, guys, great. So two things about this. The first one, remember how I told you the topics, right? Psychology, biology. Does anyone remember the other topic? Psychology, biology.
Features.
Business.
Okay, that's good, features, but that is the other subtopic, right? Good, business. So hang on a minute. So what I'm saying is, remember features, okay, I'm writing more. What I'm telling you is task 3 and 4, they share the same topics. The most common topics in task 3 and 4, as you said, somebody said, are psychology, business, and psychology, business, and biology, right? Those are the 3 most common topics. You can find something else, that's true, but most commonly you will find one of the 3. So what I'm trying to say is familiarize yourself with vocabulary related to those topics. For example, reliability is a word, is a business word, and they are evaluating if you use appropriate vocabulary. For example, if you say reliability is when something works the way we expected, it's not as good as if you say reliability is when a product works the way that the consumer expected to work, right? So it is important to use the right vocabulary, and that's why you need to maybe try to check out some words related to these topics, okay? So, all right, coming back to these features, that's perfect. That's the second subtopic. Now, what is the definition of features?
It's a trait of the product that is not necessary.
What are features?
Extra thing that make a cool product.
Okay, so it's a, okay. Yes, that's right. So these are extra things, characteristics that are not necessary for a product, but that make it cool. What about the examples? What example do we have to illustrate reliability? What's the example? What is the example for reliability?
Maybe a new car that you buy and don't need to be repaired.
Okay, good. Anything else for the example? Okay. And what about the second example? What is the example for features?
Curious.
Electric windows, stereo.
Okay. Great. Those are the features of a car. Awesome. So this is kind of how it should be. Okay, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you guys are missing something. That's fine, as long as you have the most important part, right? Reliability, features, and cars. That's it. So any questions about this, about taking notes, about using what you have in the question? Anything, or about the structure of the lecture? Okay. Then let's move on to what you actually need to say when you answer the question. So here's what we are gonna do. The first thing we'll do is understand that your response, as usual, has an introduction and a body. Okay, introduction and the body of your response. And you need to always understand that the introduction is never gonna be that important, right? The most important part is always the body. That's the main part, that's the core of your response, which means that you cannot spend more than 10 seconds in the introduction, okay? That's already 1/6 of your response. If you go over that, then it's probably not such a good thing, okay? So that is the first thing I want you guys to know. Now, what are you gonna have in each part? In the introduction, which is 10 seconds, you will just tell me the topic. And remember that I told you, best thing you can do is use what you have in the question. So try to do that, because it's the easier way and it's the faster way. When you don't use the question, then you may be tempted to waste a lot of time trying to summarize that topic. You know, you're like, okay, but what was it about exactly? I mean, what did the professor say in the intro? So if you have the question, it's on your screen. You can even read the question. So pretty easy. You say, the lecture discusses 2 major factors of product quality and consumer decision making, or their role in consumer decision making. Okay, so that is pretty much it. Your introduction, you tell me the topic, which is what you had in the question. You don't define it. You're not gonna define what quality is, or you're not gonna explain it. You just mention what the topic was. Okay? Is that okay so far? The introduction? Okay. Now for your body, for the body of your response, So as you may guess, you just have to summarize the two subtopics and their examples. The first 25 seconds of the body, so when you're like, when you have 50 seconds left, right, you should be starting to explain the first subtopic. So you explain the first one. You say, first, remember everything is what we already saw. I'm sorry, there's some things that are wrong with the template. You should start with the professor because we don't know who he or she is. And here we're missing, okay, now it's okay. So you first start with the first subtopic. You just explain it. Remember the elements that your response should have. You should have transition words. You should have reporting verbs as usual in the simple present. And that's it. Everything else is up to you. So you say, first, the professor explains reliability, which is defined as the absence of defects in a product. You give the example that the professor gave. You say, for instance, when a car is reliable, then it is not supposed to have any defects. It's supposed to work the way that the consumer expects it to work. And it doesn't need to be repaired after buying it, too soon after buying it. That's your first subtopic, right? Subtopic and example. 25 seconds is enough. Then you move on to the other one. So when you have 25 seconds left, you should be starting the second one. You say, then, in this case, a female professor, don't forget to write down in your notes, she, so you know. So then she goes on to explain features, which are those extra things that a product has, not necessary, but that make them cool. And then you give the example to illustrate. Since it was the same example, then maybe you can skip this and say, to illustrate, coming back to the previous example, the professor explains that manufacturers now add electric windows, stereos, and so forth to their cars, right? And those are the features. So that's it. Again, subtopic and example. You don't need a conclusion. Go with one, I don't know, the two things that influence a consumer's decision. Something like that, or that is how the professor explains the factors of quality. So that's it, okay? Introduction, subtopic 1, example 1, subtopic 2, and example 2. So any questions about these, about how you have to structure your response? What do you think? Is it clear? Okay, guys. Then let me give you an example. I'm gonna go with the first one. I'm gonna do what we just did. I'm gonna try to follow the template, use the information we have, and manage my time the way that I told you to. Okay, so you're gonna see how I constantly look at the timer. I'm constantly looking at how many seconds I have left. So let's see. The lecture discusses product quality, the two major factors that make up product quality, and consumer decision making. First, the professor explains the defects in a product, or when a product works the way that the consumer would expect it to work. For instance, the professor gives the example of cars. She explains that when a car is reliable, then it's probably not going to need many repairs too soon after buying it, and it will meet the consumer's expectations. Then the professor goes on to explain features, which are basically all those extra characteristics that a product might have, that even though they are not necessary, they make the product easier to use. Coming back to the previous example, the professor explains how manufacturers add stereos and air conditioning and electric windows to their cars to compete and have a better product. Okay, so that is pretty much it. I try to organize my time that way. Maybe it wasn't exactly 25 for each part. I think I spent maybe too much time in the first subtopic, then less in the second. But the important thing is that I was aware, right? I was looking at the timer, and I realized that I was running out of time. I had 10 seconds to just explain the example. So I try to speed up a little bit at the end. And you kind of need to work with that. You need to play that time. Okay, so that's it. The important thing is, remember, subtopics, examples, a short introduction, and you're good. And also your transitions and everything else. And even then, I again want to emphasize, and I can't say this enough, remember the most important part in any speaking question is, do you guys know what it is? What is the most important part in any speaking section, in any speaking task for you to do? Who can tell me? I think I said this last class. Do you guys remember? The very one thing that matters the most? Is that you show that you can speak, right? You need to show that you can, even like the content is just part of it. The way you structure it is, again, just part of it. The important thing, and that's what they are evaluating mainly, is that you show that you can speak fluently, that you can speak logically, that you can be understandable, that you have complete ideas, that you can actually create a sentence and articulate it correctly and express an idea, okay? Even if it isn't exactly what was mentioned in the lecture, even if it doesn't meet this exact template or structure, the important thing is that you're understandable, that it makes sense, right? Even if it's not exactly like what the professor said, but that it makes sense, and that you have good sentences, right? You say, the professor uses an example to illustrate the topic. That is a good sentence that proves that I can actually speak, right? So that is the most important thing. Always remember that. Any questions then? Do you have any questions? Okay, guys. So if you don't have questions, then we can start practicing. I can give you some tips as we go, and maybe we can discuss something else later. But I want to practice with, we just did business, right? This was business, yeah, business. So now let's do psychology, and then let's do biology, so we are okay with the three most common topics. So this is gonna be the lecture. I'm gonna play it, take notes, remember what you're looking for, topic, which is in the question, 2 subtopics, and 2 examples. Let's see.
Now, listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
When people are in difficult situations, sometimes they experience feelings of helplessness or psychological pain. So what do? They unconsciously use strategies called defense mechanisms to protect themselves psychologically from their painful emotions. Let's say a woman has a pet dog. She's had this dog for a long time, and he's kept her company and guarded her for years. But one day he runs away. This woman looks everywhere and asks other people if seen her dog, but she just can't find him. Now, she feels helpless and sad because she misses her dog, so she'll unconsciously find ways to deal with her painful feelings. One defense mechanism she might use is fantasy. With fantasy, the woman uses her imagination. So instead of just feeling helpless and sad about her lost dog, she invents a happy story in her mind. She might imagine that a nice family found him and feeds him, and that he's really happy with them. She'll picture the dog playing, running around, having fun. Because of this fantasy, she doesn't have to feel sad about her dog running away. It's a fantasy. It's not real, but it keeps her pain away. Another defense mechanism she might use is what we call sublimation. Sublimation is different from fantasy because sublimation isn't about pretending. It's about turning negative emotions into something practical. Hers did. In other words, with sublimation as a defense mechanism, the woman redirects her negative feelings about losing her dog into a positive, constructive activity.
Okay. Now the question is, using points and examples from the talk, describe the two defense mechanisms mentioned by the professor. Now you've got 20 seconds to prepare your response.
Teacher, sorry, I couldn't understand the lecture because I have problems with my Wi-Fi, I think, because I couldn't hear anything.
Okay, Vania. So do you guys want to listen one more time? Okay, was it my audio file? Okay. Hang on a second. Okay, so I'm gonna play the audio again, sorry.
Now listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class.
When people are in difficult situations, sometimes they experience feelings of helplessness or psychological pain. So what do? They unconsciously use strategies called defense mechanisms to protect themselves psychologically from their painful emotions. Let's say a woman has a pet dog. She's had this dog for a long time, and he's kept her company and guarded her for years, but one day he runs away. This woman looks everywhere and asks other people if they've seen her dog, but she just can't find him. Now, she feels helpless and sad because she misses her dog, so she'll unconsciously find ways to deal with her painful feelings. One defense mechanism she might use is fantasy. With fantasy, the woman uses her imagination. So instead of just feeling helpless and sad about her lost dog, she invents a happy story in her mind. She might imagine that a nice family found him and feeds him, and that he's really happy with them. She'll picture the dog playing, running around, having fun. Because of this fantasy, she doesn't have to feel sad about her dog running away. It's a fantasy. It's not real, but it keeps her pain away. Another defense mechanism she might use is what we call sublimation. Sublimation is different from fantasy because sublimation isn't about pretending. It's about turning negative emotions into something useful, practical. So the woman might start a dog training school. That way, by training dogs, perhaps she can help prevent other people's dogs from running away like hers did. In other words, with sublimation as a defense mechanism, the woman redirects her negative feelings about losing her dog into a positive, constructive activity.
Guys, and now you have 20 seconds to prepare. Okay. So who would like to try? Anyone would like to try?
Me, teacher.
You want to go, Leonardo?
Yes. Can you hear me first?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, so please go now.
The lecture discusses a defense mechanism that is the way of some people defend themselves from their pain situation or pain feelings. For first, she said one of these defense mechanisms is fantasy, that is when people use their imagination to uncover a bad situation, such as imagine that a woman who lost her dog, he is with the family and they food him. Another situation is a sublimation, where people turn this negative emotion into a practical situation, such as the same woman redirect the negative feelings into an activity, for example, training dogs.
Okay, Leonardo, well done. Great. So one thing I really liked is the way that you speed up at the end, because you noticed that you were missing out time, you were running out of time, and you got to say what you needed to say, that to explain the second example that was missing. It's great. It's exactly what you guys need to do. Now, maybe in order to save time and not run out of time later, it's okay if you mention the definition here, right? Remember defense mechanisms, which is this and that, but it's not necessary and it's not that important. So you can just say the lecture discusses two defense mechanisms. First, the professor explains fantasy, or the first one is fantasy, right? And you explain. So maybe you can save time by avoiding that explanation in the beginning. And I guess that's it. Honestly, that's the only comment I could make, because everything else was great. You used your transitions, the content was good, grammar was also good. So yep, just maybe skip that part to save time.
Thank you.
Okay, Leonardo. Anybody else wants to try this one here? Or should we do the other one now? Okay. Let me change Wi-Fi's. Okay. Then let's do the biology one now. It's gonna be a little bit harder, but it's really important that you guys see how it is, because biology is very common and the structure is pretty much the same. Every time you have biology, it's always the same. So let's see, okay? I'm gonna play the lecture, please take notes.
Listen to part of a lecture in a marine biology class.
A lot of plants and animals live near the surface of the ocean, and that means there's a lot of food near the surface because there are lots of plants and animals to eat. But if you go down to the deepest parts of the ocean, it's cold and dark, and there's not a lot living down there, so food is very scarce. So organisms that live down at these great depths have developed special adaptations to help them survive in this environment where food is so hard to find. For example, many deep-sea organisms have body features that enable them to eat prey that are larger than themselves. A good example, there's a species of eel that has an enormous mouth and a large stomach that's capable of expanding. And these unusual features allow this eel to eat prey larger than itself. That's a big advantage, because if the eel eats something big, that's a lot of food, a lot of nutrition. So the eel can go for quite a while before it has to find food again. Another helpful adaptation in some deep-sea organisms is the ability to generate light. and some organisms use that light to help them capture food. For example, there's a kind of fish called the anglerfish, and on its head, this fish has a little structure that produces light, that glows in the dark. This little structure, this little light, is positioned close to the fish's mouth. Other fish are attracted to this light. They think it's something small they can eat, so they swim straight toward it, and that brings them close enough for the anglerfish to capture them and eat them.
Okay. The question is, using the examples of the eel and anglerfish, explain two types of adaptations that help animals survive in the deepest parts of the ocean. Okay, now you've got 20 seconds to prepare. Okay. So would anyone like to try this one here? Try it out. Nope. Maybe, I don't know. Natalie, what about you? Do you want to try?
Okay.
Okay, you can, do you want me to put the template on my screen?
No,
Nope, okay.
no, thank you.
So you can go.
The lecture discusses how animals survive in the deepest part of the ocean. First, the professor explained that eel and eaglefish um, make them a big mouth. So them evolution with a big mouth, so they can eat a lot. And the second is generate light that can attract some fish in the deepest part that is not light, so they can catch a fish to in order to eat them.
Okay, Natalie, great, thank you. So great response. Okay, I think the content is good. Maybe there's one just thing that I could say, and that's actually what I wanted to get, because I don't know, for some reason it's very confusing with biology topic or gas. It is kind of true, but not always.
Sorry, Andrea. You get frozen, so could you please
Oh,
repeat it?
yeah, I'm sorry. So I was saying, sometimes it can be very confusing with, especially with biology. I've seen this many times to differentiate the subtopics from the examples. But there's one trick here. The examples are always gonna be two animals or two plants. Two animals or two plants. In this case, the good thing is that they even give you the examples in the question, right? The two examples were the first one, the eel, and the second, the anglerfish. Okay, careful. The two of them, they are not a subtopic. They are the examples of each subtopic. The second subtopic, you got it right. Subtopic 1 was actually body features. And the example 1 was the eel. And then subtopic 2 was what you said, ability to generate light. And the example number 2 was the second animal. So in this case, anglerfish. Okay, so it can be confusing. Make sure that you pay attention to the question. They tell you explicitly that they are examples, so that you know that they are the two examples. And the two subtopics are going to be something like that, adaptations or characteristics, I don't know. So careful with that, the way that you explain it. And I guess that's the only thing. I like how you use the question, the adaptations that help animals survive in your introduction. You kept the structure too. And the way that you explained it was right as well. Just careful with that differentiation. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, guys. So yes. Any questions? Any comments? Okay, now honestly, were you able to understand everything from this lecture? Did you find it hard? Did anyone get lost there?
Maybe at the beginning.
Okay, all right, but you were okay, Natalie, because I think that you understood. You were just maybe confusing a little bit, but yes, you're okay. So I wanted to say this because like from other groups, I've seen that some people were struggling with these biology tests. And I wanted to say again, you know, the most important thing is always to show that you can speak fluently, which most of you can. So even if you, for example, you didn't have any information about the lecture, you can still have an answer. It's not going to be a perfect answer, but it is an answer and it is good with what you have from the question. Only using this information, you can still have an answer. You can say, the professor talks about how the adaptations that help animals survive in the ocean and has two types of adaptations because we know that there are two types. First, the professor explains the first type and uses the example of the eel, which is an animal that lives in the ocean, and how they have adapted their body in order to survive. Then the professor explains the anglerfish and how they live, how they have another type of adaptation that also helps them survive. So I didn't say anything new, anything from the lecture, but I said something, right? And I demonstrated that I can use sentences, complete ones, complete ideas, and everything else. So if you didn't understand something, always improvise. Make sure that you know the structure, so you know how you can do it. But you demonstrate that you can speak, right? That's the most important part. So any questions then? Any comments, anything before we go? What do you think?
Sure.
Yes, tell me, Leonardo.
Today I did the simulation TOEFL, and in the part of writing, my question is, in the real TOEFL, I can make and take notes about the writing. It isn't cheap. How to say, to take notes about the writing.
Yes, of course, you can take notes. You can take notes in any section of the TOEFL that you want, specifically in the integrated writing, right? Where you have to read something, then you can take notes or listen. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Any other question? Okay. So then please don't forget to fill out the daily survey before you go. And I'll see you all this Thursday or in our next class.
Thank you. Have a nice one.
Great. Bye, guys. Take care.
Teacher.